A striking leading male, a ferocious female predator, squabbling siblings, and an only child that expects everything from its foster parents. With this cast of characters and a soap opera full of drama, surprise, intrigue, and beauty, it can only mean one thing. It's time for Springwatch.
Hello and welcome to Springwatch 2023, coming to you live from the beautiful RSPB Arn Reserve here in Dorset. Look at the sunshine, look at the view. Stunning, absolutely stunning. Week 2, we got off to a flying start. We've had some successful procreation, quite a lot of successful predation too, and a bit more of that coming up later in the programme. We've also got this beautiful family of foxes. We introduced you to them last week. Jess McCaffrey has caught them on her trap cameras up in Scotland. They're growing quite rapidly, and here they are out and about in their den area, sniffling and snuffling. Oh, they're absolutely stunning, aren't they?
They really are. What a way to start the show, eh? A for adorable, B for beautiful, C for cute. Absolutely gorgeous. Let's catch up with our live nests and go and have a look at the selection that we've got. We've got a lot of action in there, but I'm going to take you first of all to the one right in the middle, our kestrel nest. And I'm pleased to tell you, oh, look at that, that's quite funny, isn't it? Little fly going around confusing that chick. But this is a happy nest this week. There are 5 chicks in there. You can see they're all doing well. They're all behaving themselves. They're all being fed and they're all growing.
Yeah, they are. Look at that. You can see little tufty tails appearing on the one on the right there, and also some of their scapular feathers coming through. And they've grown quite considerably since we started watching them last week. At that point, it was primarily the female that was coming in to feed them. Male was supplying some of the food, but she was certainly the one that was tearing it all up and making sure that it was shared equally between all of those chicks. And there you can see them munching on a vole. As I say, the male was bringing food in, didn't spend too much time delivering it, just dumping it and then clearing out, but it did give us an opportunity to look at that male. Beautiful bird, lovely ashy grey head, matching tail, stunning little falcon, the male kestrel. But the chicks have been growing really, really rapidly. That's the key thing, and that's down to all of that food that they've been bringing in to them. And they've been starting to feed for themselves, or at least to try, and you can see this one's mantling. It's even stretching its little wings out, trying to stop the food being stolen by its siblings, but that didn't work. One on the right gets it, and then one surges through from the back and takes that away. And that, if you were kestrel quick with your eyesight, was a sand lizard. So they've been getting a great range of different foods being brought into this nest. Here, looks like a bank vole, snatched by one of the larger chicks, who takes it off to the corner. And then, well, this is a grotesque act of greed, basically, because it's swallowing the vole whole. A whole vole goes down the hole. And look at that. Oh, my goodness. We've all been there, haven't we? You know, you've ordered an extra Bombay potatoes and the bindi bhaji. You really didn't need the onion bhajis to start and all of those poppadoms, and you slump back in the chair thinking, I wish I hadn't done that.
That little chick is going, oh, couldn't eat another thing. OK, let's have a look at another live nest, the oyster catchers. This is the nest, and you can see that there's nothing there except those 3 eggs. If you remember, there were 6 eggs in that nest. 3 of them hatched, and 3 of them remain unhatched without any of the adults incubating them. So I doubt that they will now. Now, if we pull away from those eggs, we can see that there's a heron quite close. Wouldn't be surprised if that heron made the most of those eggs. It could also be a predator for the young chicks. There are 2 chicks that have survived after hatching and are wandering around on the bank. So we must keep an eye on that heron.
Keeping an eye on the heron indeed, yes. What's happened to those chicks? Well, I think the adults abandoned those 3 eggs. They hadn't hatched. They sat on them for an extra day. But those chicks were out and about roaming. They needed looking after. Also, they were feeding those chicks by catching food down on the shore and then carrying it all the way back up to the top of the island to where those eggs were. So they've left those 3 unhatched eggs. We're not entirely sure which clutch that was. We'll check later if we can without disturbing the birds. But here they are down on the shore, and the adults will be feeding them. They won't fledge for 35 days, quite a long time for a wader like this. And even then, for months afterwards, the adults will continue to feed them. And there are 2 principal reasons for this. One is that they won't be anatomically mature. In short, their beaks won't be big enough and strong enough to break open those bivalves, those muscles which they need to feed on. And also, during the course of that time, the parents will have to teach them how to break open those muscles too. So unlike many other species of wader, they are dependent on their parents for several months afterwards. But if they do survive, they can live a long time. How long do you think?
Oh, 30, 35 years?
43.
43!
The oldest oyster catcher recorded was 43 years old.
Wow.
It's amazing.
I'll tell you though, those chicks are very vulnerable though, so the parents are going to have to be vigilant. Let's check out our buzzard nest. I find this nest really interesting because all looks calm at the moment, and you've got the adult bird sitting there, the 2 chicks. There are 2, one's much bigger than the other. Very calm, cool and collected. But it hasn't always been like that. It seems to change from this scene, again, when it's all calm, the adults are coming in with a slow worm, feeding those chicks, and then it'll switch to bully boy behaviour. And that larger chick is really quite vicious to the smaller one, which we reckon is about 3 days younger. But look at it, pecking its back. It gets so vicious, it puts its claws in its back and it pecks so hard that it literally rips the flesh away. It's horrible to watch. You know what they say, what goes around comes around, and just watch what happens now. That bully boy gets his claws stuck in his head. We were a bit concerned about it, but then it managed to get it out. It sort of sulks in the corner. But look at this little one, panting. It's wounded, it's deflated, it's bullied. But then, another day, all is calm again. The adults come in with all that food and they take it in turns to eat it. But look at this, I like this, because then this little one that's been bullied is feisty, snatches that prey away, but then sadly realises that it's not capable of taking the feathers off that bit of prey and feeding it to itself, so it has to wait for the adult. But you can see it's being fed, it's strong, it's feisty, and it's still being bullied. And as I say, these attacks get really vicious. Look at that, I mean, it's just horrible to watch. But it's doing okay. That little one is still doing okay. And do you know, we've had
It's doing okay. It's mentally scarred. What are you talking
Well, it's
about?
mentally scarred, but
How do you want to be stuck in a nest with a big bully like that slashing your back?
No, I would absolutely hate it, I've got to say. But isn't it interesting that we've had plenty of buzzard nests in the past on the watches. We've never seen that sort of behaviour before. Apparently it does happen in buzzards' nests. We've seen it with the kestrels when they bully their weaker chicks so much that they end up dying. But I don't know, I'm going to... surprise, surprise, I'm going to be positive, and I think it's feisty enough to survive.
We think they're about 25 days old at the moment. That means that they could, well, that little chick could need to spend another 25 days in the nest, more than 3 weeks. It's going to be on buzzard line as soon as it possibly can, complaining about the bullying.
I don't like that big one. I've really gone off it.
OK. Let's leave the buzzards for the moment and head north to the Isle of Anglesey on the north coast of Wales, where Gillian is certainly not being bullied by a buzzard.
No, we have no mini relationship dramas here, you'll be pleased to know. We're all about big picture stuff here. We are on Menai Strait in North Wales. You've got the Menai Bridge behind me on this side, and then there's another crossing, the Britannia Bridge. Now, those 2 bridges link the mainland of Wales across to Anglesey Island, and they span the Menai Strait, an area that is absolutely famous for fast-moving tidal currents that bring nutrients and oxygen to the wildlife here twice a day with the tides. They also, on occasion, will bring the rare exotic visitor as well. Now, a few days ago, I went to a makeshift rescue centre that's been set up at Anglesey Sea Zoo, and I went to meet the team there that are nursing a rare but very lucky tropical visitor.
In the winter of 2016, a rare olive ridley turtle washed up on the shore outside the Anglesey Sea Zoo. She was in a critical condition when Frankie Hobro and her team at the aquarium rapidly closed part of their display and dedicated their time to saving this turtle's life. Since then, 2 more turtles have washed up on Anglesey shores, and Frankie has been there to take them in.
Although we're an all-British aquarium, we're starting to see that there's a need to have a tropical turtle rescue facility, because we're actually starting to have cold-stranded turtles washing up now on the coast here, and we're caring for those.
Although turtles aren't unheard of in UK waters, they were once a rare sight off our coasts. But one species is now an almost seasonal visitor to the oceans around the British Isles.
Loggerhead turtles are one of the more common turtle species, and they're found in a lot of different parts of Europe. The bottom sort of range of temperature for them, comfortable range, is sort of 20, 19, 18 degrees centigrade. And of course now in sort of August, September time, we're seeing those kind of temperatures here around the UK for several weeks. What happens then, of course, these animals are coming a little bit closer to the UK than they would have done. Then you get these sudden autumn storms, so we're starting to get this mixing of water. These little turtles are suddenly hit by a wall of cold water from the Arctic, and they go into cold stun mode, which is a bit like a coma really, completely into shutdown mode, and they just get carried, and the direction the current's carrying them is basically straight up between Ireland and Wales, so we're seeing them all get washed up around the sort of Welsh coast.
Frankie and her team are currently looking after the 2 stranded turtles, and I'm going to meet the newest arrival, Tony the loggerhead.
Oh, look, that's Tony.
Yes, that's Tony, our little loggerhead.
Loggerhead. So he's here in January.
Yeah, so the 5th of January, water temperature is at around 5 or 6 degrees on the Menai Strait. Very, very cold stunned, you know, very unresponsive. And so we went through the critical care process. So this is our makeshift incubator. It's no longer as much of an incubator now because Tony's at the sort of later stages of recovery. But initially, it has to be very well insulated and no water because the turtle is too weak to lift its head to breathe, so we can't risk drowning. We have to maintain 1 degree increase per day with the temperature. So it's a very, very intense process.
This must have been a really steep learning curve for you and your team.
The most challenging thing really has been that we're all cold water, we're all British cold water species here, and we're suddenly in this situation when we've got these animals that need this really intense temperature regime, and often to be kept in quite warm water as well. There isn't a centre in the UK, and we know we're going to need it. We've already needed it ourselves, needed to be it ourselves, and we know the equipment that we need, and then we'll be able to help more turtles going forward as they arrive.
So what is the next step for Tony? What's the future?
Tony is at the stage of feeding and being at the right temperature, then we'd be able to put some water in and we can look at increasing the depth of water and having a bigger tank as well.
So he can start swimming, getting strong again.
Yeah, getting that muscle strength for diving and things is really important before they get released.
Brilliant.
We know that turtles live to be 80, 90, even 100 years old or older, all turtle species. So this is going to be a snapshot, you know, so even if Tony's here for a few more months, when we release him, then, you know, he's got all these kind of years ahead, obviously to reach maturity and to start breeding.
Once he's out there in the wild, all of this experience will be a distant memory.
So it might be quite a long process that we're doing here, but yeah, the end result is to have a turtle that's back out there contributing to turtle populations and living its life not in captivity.
Well, if you want to find out more about Tony the loggerhead or to find out about the incredible work that Frankie and her team are doing, then head to our website. Now, later on in the programme tonight, we're going to be coming back here to the Menai Strait to find out how you can help nature by doing absolutely nothing. And Megan, doesn't that sound a little bit nice, doing nothing to help nature?
Yeah. I'm a big advocate for that, Gillian. I love just taking a step back and letting nature do its thing. Sometimes we can overmanage things, and sometimes the best thing to do is just step back and, well, let it flourish in the way that nature does. Now, today I'm down further on in the peninsula. I'm at Studland Bay. Here I am over here on this part of the peninsula, just where this male sand lizard is. a bit more on those amazing species a little bit later on. So that's where I am, but I'm in and surrounded by this most amazing, ecologically important dune system. Now this dune system hasn't always been here. It's been growing over the last 500 years and it started on the eastern side of this Studland Peninsula. It's an ever-changing, dynamic ecosystem, and every time you visit, I guarantee that you'll have an entirely different experience because you never know what you're going to see and how the dunes are shaping that landscape. But the big question remains, how do dunes actually work? How do they get started? Well, welcome to my miniature dune model here. So, a big storm, imagine a big storm coming in from this direction, and it creates a seaweed strand line here, bringing in all the seaweed from the ocean. Over time, the wind comes and it builds up the sand, and it creates what's called an embryo dune. Now, over time, this basically starts to invite pioneer plant species, something like Mariam grass here. And this grass is very good at tolerating really harsh conditions. This Mariam grass basically is able to tolerate the salt, the wind, and everything that the dunes can throw at it. Now, throughout time, of course, this Mariam grass will die and grow and die and grow, creating lots of dead organic matter that puts a lot of nutrients back into the soil. So then the dune system will kind of go forth in succession and create this heathland, a heath dune, where a more substantial plant can grow. And over time, then at the very back, you might even get scrub woodland. So this is how dune succession works. It's a fantastic ecosystem, but it is one that is increasingly rare here in the UK, especially in its newest sandy form. So earlier on, I met up with David Brown from the National Trust to find out how they're conserving this important habitat.
Oh, here we go. Look, that's a trackway. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's a sand lizard because you've got there's a sort of fairly continuous line in the middle, which is where its tail is and its feet either side.
Sure, so it's got this like tail drag, which is a bit more of an indent.
Yeah, and it's probably gone down from the sort of higher point, which has probably been heating itself up in the morning.
Yeah.
Just down here, there's a sort of cooler, moister, wetter area, and there's probably more insects and stuff for it to eat down there.
So essentially the sand lizards are on the move for dinner?
Yeah, probably. But actually, that's one of the things that make dunes rich for wildlife, because the topography is really complicated. You've got all these little hummocks, and you've got north-facing bits and south-facing bits. You get sunny spots and shady spots.
Because sand is so fluid, dunes are dynamic landscapes, constantly moving and changing. A good balance between sandy areas and vegetation is vital to the ecological health of sand dunes. But the rate of vegetation growth on dunes across Western Europe has really sped up since the mid-20th century, partly because air pollution has made the sand slightly more fertile.
In the case of Studland, 60, 70 years ago, there was about 30% of the dune system was open sand, whereas now it's around 2%. So
wow, that little?
Yeah. I mean, imagine you're one of the species, a sand lizard or something else, that needs that bare sand. You've got suddenly a much smaller habitat to live in. So in terms of management, that's one of the things we've been trying to address in recent years. We've made a couple of dozen areas like this where we've been in with diggers, peeling off that top layer of vegetation just to create that variety, that kind of complexity of habitats so that all the species that need it have got somewhere to live.
Anything moved in yet?
Well, yeah, actually.
Yeah?
They have.
Oh, that's what I like to hear. That's good.
I mean, it's early days, but the first thing we've seen is just on the edges of it, you've got loads of little burrows. If you look in that kind of vertical mini cliff face there, which these like as well, you can see it's full of little holes.
Loads in there, aren't there?
Yeah. These larger ones are likely to be mining bees, possibly even beetles, actually, and then you'll have sand wasps. There's loads of species that need this habitat, and some of them are really rare. You know, they kind of don't look much, long Latin names, but you'll only find them in a very small part of the UK here on the south coast. So it's really important we keep these habitats here for these species.
It's great to know people like David are working so hard to keep these dunes alive.
David, I can't believe that this is your office. I mean, seriously, it's pretty good, isn't it?
Yeah, no, we're lucky. We do have to pinch ourselves sometimes.
Now, I really enjoyed meeting David and learning all about the important conservation work that him and his team do. And a little bit later on, as I mentioned, I'll be diving into the ecology and behaviour of some amazing sand lizards. But now it's time to take ourselves off to the small, tiny world of an insect which I hold my hands up. I think it might be a hard sell, but after watching this, I hope you can appreciate them that little bit more.
In a Nigerian grassland, thousands of migrants are gathering. Halfway through their journey to the UK, they have a grueling and dangerous 3,000 miles to go. Swallows. Many may succumb to starvation along the way. Those who arrive will be hungry. Here, as the swallows approach, a feast is in the making, as hundreds of thousands of eggs are laid, soon to be a buzzing buffet. Each of these floating rafts holds between 100 and 200 mosquito eggs, a common sight at this time of year in ponds and waterways across the UK. For the mosquito eggs, an incredible transformation is about to take place. Just days after they're laid, the eggs begin to hatch. They emerge as tiny larvae, measuring just a millimetre in length. At this point, they're aquatic, breathing air through a snorkel-like siphon and filter feeding on microorganisms such as algae and bacteria. As the days pass by, they grow larger and larger, until, having reached the size of up to 7 millimetres, they're ready to pupate. For a short time, the mosquitoes cease their ravenous feeding. An eerie silence takes over as they transform into alien-like forms. They continue to evolve inside the pupa. For a few days, the mosquito pupae remain in this state of stillness, breathing through trumpets on their head. Within weeks of their life cycle beginning, they emerge into their adult form. This species, known as Culex pipiens, is the most common mosquito in the British Isles. Though their appearance, on closer inspection, is far from common. The males come complete with a pair of feathered antennae, which will assist them when it comes to finding a mate. But they won't help avoid hungry new arrivals. The swallows have reached Britain, and they're keen to feed. And the newly hatched adults provide the perfect banquet. But for those mosquitoes lucky enough to escape the gaping bills of these aerial insectivores, there's only one thing left to do: to kick-start the life cycle all over again. Shortly after mating, the newly hatched females deposit their own floating rafts of eggs on the water's surface. laying the foundations of another generation. She will lay 3 rafts of eggs a few days apart. And in doing so, she plays a vital part in the lifeblood of our wetland ecosystem.
I found that really rather beautiful. And those are 2 words I never thought I'd put together. Beautiful and mosquito. They've never been one of my favourite creatures, but I've got a whole new respect for them now.
I like a mosquito.
Well, I don't know if you really... You like their life cycle. I don't think you like it when they're
I never
on
swat
you.
mosquitoes. I brush them off.
Brush them off
I always
gently.
consider that, you know, they need a little meal. I've got plenty of blood. They're not going to take all of it. And they can be a little bit irritating. Unfortunately, I don't react to their bites, you know. And obviously, in areas where there's malaria, one has to take a different approach to mosquitoes. But yeah, fantastic stuff. Now, at the top of the programme, we showed you Jess McCaffrey's foxes. We introduced you to the family that she'd found quite close to where she lives up in Scotland last week. They've grown a bit now. Now, the first thing I've got to say is this is not contemporary. This is back on the 12th of May here. So we're looking back in time at these animals. They'll be considerably bigger now, but they're still growing in terms of the way we saw them previously. Magpies, well, they're always around fox dens, magpies and crows, picking up any scraps that the adult foxes have left behind and the cubs haven't eaten. But of course, they're not quick enough to catch those magpies, and the magpies are well aware of that, sneaking in, look, whilst they're preoccupied, weaning there to see if there's anything that's been left around. Now, when we first showed you these last weeks, we thought they were 4 or 5 weeks old. Here, they're probably nudging maybe 6 weeks. Look at the one in the foreground on the right. You can just see little sharp canine teeth coming through there, which is an indication of their age. Practicing hunting, and also constantly a bit of rough and tumble. And what we've learned looking at not foxes but other species of mammal recently is that the bigger and the braver and the bolder the kits and cubs, even at a very early stage in their life, will lead to changes in their behaviour when they're adults. So here, the biggest, the bravest and the boldest will continue to keep that trait throughout the course of the rest of their lives. Mother now has to lay down. They're too big. The only way that we're all going to attach to her teats is if she lays down. I mean, they could almost be taking some solid food at this stage, but knowing foxes as I do, they will continue to try and get their mother's milk every time she returns, even if she's bringing solid food. And here you can see they're teasing her, pushing her muzzle there, tempting her to regurgitate. And that's why when you get home, after you've been away, if you've got a dog, it will run up and try and lick your mouth, because it's that vestige of behaviour that it's kept from its canid ancestors, wolves in the case of dogs, where puppies will lick the faces of the adults to get them to regurgitate. And I've done that, and I can tell you that the poodles will take advantage of anything that you can offer them.
Oh no, that's absolutely revolting. And that was from such a gorgeous scene.
It's not revolting, it's real life.
It was a gorgeous scene with the bluebells and everything. That's
and now I've ruined it.
You've ruined it, absolutely. Right, I'm going to take you to, well, I'm sorry, but this has become my favourite nest of the season so far. The osprey nest. Let's have a look at it live. I love this nest because it's positive, it's hopeful, it's successful so far. And we've got these 3 chicks. Look at that. That is live, being beautifully fed by their parents there. But you know, every day we get an update of what happened in the last 12 hours. And this morning in my inbox it said, wriggling fish wax chicks. I thought, what on earth is that about? Well, I'm just about to show you, because the parents have brought this fish in. It's not dead. It's still, well, a little bit alive, and it whacks them. Can you see? Whacks them in the face. Now rewind and let's show that in slow motion. So the fish is still alive, it's wriggling, and then in slow motion we can see the tail flicks up, whacks all 3 chicks in the face, and look what happens. It literally knocks them out. Now, of course, we were extremely concerned watching these, because these are very, very precious chicks. And they're out. 2 of them recover pretty quickly, seemingly completely unscathed by the whack in the face. And they're fed, but that other little chick was out for 6 minutes. And everyone was just holding their breath watching this. Huge concern for this little chick. As time went by, you could see it's coming around. It's clearly a bit confused, a little bit dazed, and then it started to feed. Thank goodness for that, because, you know, we've had a lot of predation, we've had all sorts of drama. I was not expecting to lose a chick from a fish whacking it in the face. I mean, that would just be absurd, wouldn't
Do you know,
it?
I've never seen anyone slip on a banana skin, but now I have seen someone get slapped around the face by a wet fish.
A wet fish. I mean, if it wasn't so awful, it would be comical, wouldn't it? But you may have noticed that in that nest, there's a little bit of plastic, and a lot of people have asked us on social media, why is it there, and is there anything we can do about it?
Well, it was integrated into the nest at the building stage, so that plastic's been there a long time before the eggs were laid. It wasn't the only piece of plastic that was brought in, and of course we know about the ills of plastic waste in our landscape, especially in the sea, but also on the land too. This looks like bale plastic, the plastic that's used to cover bales of hay, but of course bottles discarded, bottle tops, all of these things can be problematic for wildlife. And here you saw how it got tangled around the adult's foot, then it was being pulled across the tops of those chicks. If they were any bigger, they could have been dragged out. Fortunately, it's now got ripped and it's blown over the side of the nest and become entangled there. So it's out of the way, it seems, at the moment.
But it doesn't answer the question, is anyone going to do anything about it? Well, remember, this is being watched by Birds of Poole Harbour, and they've tried to minimise any risk. When they saw it come in, when that nest was first being built, they tried to remove any plastic from surrounding areas. But what about the plastic that's already there? Well, it's 33 metres up a tree, so it would be a huge thing for someone to climb up there, disrupt the nest, that the adults would fly away. You know, it would be problematic to the chicks. So it's a real dilemma. They are keeping their eye on that plastic, and obviously if it does present itself as a big problem, then they might think again. But for now, it's out the way, and the ospreys seem to be fine.
Fingers crossed it just blows off and someone can pick it up and take it out of the environment where it didn't ought to be in the first place. Let's head north again to Anglesey, where Gillian, I think, is going to be active in the night.
Well, we're certainly active, and we're not doing so much here. We're not having wildlife conservation interventions. What we're doing is looking at how you can do less to help our wildlife. Now, let me explain. I'm on Church Island on the Menai Strait in Anglesey because this church here took part in No Mow May. Now, this is a campaign that's run by Plant Life through the month of May, as the name suggests, and this is where it encourages people with gardens, churchyards, and even councils not to cut their grass through May. So why are we talking about it in June? Well, this is a really great time to take stock of the fruits of our non-labor, if you like, the benefits of doing nothing at all and letting the garden go, if you like. So let's take a look at the cemetery around here and what it looks like at the moment. Absolutely beautiful, peaceful scenes there, oxeye daisies coming up. But that long grass there, really valuable habitat for all sorts of invertebrates, but also you can see there the clover there, that's really valuable, nutrient-rich nectar for all sorts of flying insects that are out and about at this time of the year. Now, local recorders, dedicated recorders, Charles Aaron and Steve Palin, arrived here last night just as we finished filming to set up one of these. They wanted to see what moth species might have benefited from No Mow May. So they set up this. This is called a Robinson moth trap, and it takes advantage of the behavior of many night-flying moths. As you will well know, they are attracted to the light. It's called phototactic behavior. And they'll fly towards this light source. They'll land on this funnel here and then sort of slide down and into this container where those egg boxes there provide lots of nooks and crannies where they can crawl into and then settle down. And then when day breaks, they can come and check these traps and see what moths have been collected and gathered, and then safely release them once they've ID'd them that evening. Now, I've just got one or two specimens here that they did find. very tiny little things. They found lots and lots of what they call micro moths. This one is the twin-barred knothead. Let's take a closer look at it because they are, of course, very difficult to see. These are called the micro moths. A lot of these species very closely associated with grasses. Now you can see this one, that narrow body allows it to cling onto a single blade of grass during the day. And here as well, this one is called the grassy meadow veneer. Now this, the garden grass veneer, the same sort of thing. It stays in the grass. This beautiful one here, the common swift, also associated grass, and this seriously narrow one, the meadow case bearer. Sounds quite ominous, but that also, all those micromoths are associated with tall grass, and you'll see them when you're walking through long grass. They'll fly out as they get disturbed. Now, it wasn't just the micromoths that Steve and Charles were after. They did want to impress, so they did head a little further afield from Church area, but still in this Church Island, but still in this area. And they found some real whoppers as well. Now, let's look at this one. A very colourful, absolutely beautiful elephant hawk moth. Now this is a night-flying adult. It will be feeding at night on flowers, but this here, the poplar hawk moth, what it lacks in colour, it makes up for those very fancy wings that help them camouflage against bark when it lands. And then this one as well, the eyed hawk moth. Now the eyed hawk moth, the poplar hawk moth, they are more associated with woodland, less grass specialists, but of course all these habitats are connected. So if you're allowing parts of your garden through June into July to grow tall, it helps to connect all these beautiful habitats and might draw in some of these absolutely amazing species. Now we do have some of these species. You've seen the micromoth earlier. We're going to be releasing a lot of these, and I just wanted to show you that poplar hawk moth. We've released the other hawk moths last night, and I'm going to try and encourage this one out because it'd be really nice. This is the right time of day to release them, the right location to see if this hawk moth takes flight. It might not, it might decide to settle on my hand, but that's okay. We'll just roll with it because, of course, Church Island isn't the only place that took part in No More May. Now, many of you have been sending your photos right through the month of May. Let's take a look at some of them because they're really quite impressive. Now, this one is another churchyard in Bristol. You can see the before, the after. That's seriously impressive. You can see how much more habitat is available there. But there are other gardens, beautiful areas here. Now, Plant Life estimate that the total area of garden lawns in the country is 120,000 hectares, which is quite amazing. That is the size of Bedfordshire. Now this is still on here, so I'm going to see if I can encourage it to fly off or at least rest it over here. It obviously really likes my finger. But of course, all that habitat will be a great place, off it goes, a great place for all these amazing insects to thrive. So absolutely carry on with No More May into June, July, but you can, of course, start to cut some of your grass. Just leave a few of those areas messy and unkept. Now for something really quite different. Now, last night you might remember that President of the BTO and BBC correspondent Frank Gardner headed out to reveal the extent to which hen harriers are being persecuted in Britain's uplands. Sadly, it isn't just hen harriers that are being illegally killed, and grouse moors aren't the only hotspots. So in tonight's film, Frank heads to Norfolk, to meet a group of people that are doing their best to hold those responsible to account. And I must warn you that this next film does have some images that some of you might find distressing.
The UK has a long and dark history of raptor persecution. Red kites classed as vermin in the 1600s. Golden eagles driven to extinction in England and Wales by the late 1800s.
Sadly, despite all the efforts to protect raptors, there are still people out there who view them as a threat to their way of life. And that means that despite the fact that it's illegal, killing them is anything but a thing of the past.
Raptor persecution takes many forms, from poisoning and shooting to disturbing a nest. According to the RSPB's most recent bird crime report, in 2021, there were 108 confirmed raptor persecution incidents detected in the UK.
Although the Countryside Alliance, an organisation that campaigns for hunting and shooting in the UK, questions these figures, they told us, while many reports of such persecution have proven to be false and confirmed cases are decreasing, we strongly condemn any incident of raptor persecution. According to the RSPB,
the worst hit county was Norfolk. So I've come to Lakenheath Nature Reserve on the Norfolk-Suffolk border to meet the head of the RSPB's investigations team, Mark Thomas.
I love this place, Lakenheath. I haven't been here for years.
It's one of the best places to come to see March harriers. This is also a really good spot here for buzzard, if we keep our eyes open. That's now Britain's commonest bird of prey. It's amazing. It's actually also, really sadly, our most persecuted bird of prey. Barely a week goes by without the investigations team having a report about a dead buzzard, a shot buzzard, a trapped buzzard. It keeps us very busy.
Who's killing them and why?
So, in terms of our bird crime report, 71% of all the incidents are in connection with land managed for game birds. So in the lowlands, that would be pheasant and partridge, and in the uplands, grouse.
According to the RSPB report, the other 29% of incidents are mostly classed as unknown, as there isn't enough information or evidence.
All birds are protected in the UK, and our job is to catch people, work with the police, and bring those people to justice.
It was heartbreaking to hear about the plight of hen harriers in Cumbria. But according to Mark, that's just the tip of the iceberg.
So if we look on the map here, this has got a few of the most recent incidents on. It's happening across the whole of the UK. In the last 20 years, we've had 3,000 confirmed incidents.
Wow.
Would you like to see the footage?
Not really, no. But I feel I should.
Yes.
This is going to be grisly, isn't it?
Yes, so a member of the public noticed a buzzard inside a big trap, a big wooden trap. They telephoned the RSPB. We went out to the location and we released that buzzard, but we put a secret camera in at that site. And what we caught over the next couple of days was pretty horrific.
Right.
You can see the person inside the trap. And that's a local gamekeeper, and you can see he's got a stick in his hand.
No.
And there he's...
Oh, my God, he's beating this buzzard to death.
It's really horrific to watch, actually. It's pretty heartbreaking.
It really is.
We've had a number of these types of cases in the last 10 to 20 years.
What sort of percentage result in convictions?
This one was a conviction. It was a suspended jail sentence, but very few do. You need really good evidence. You've got to be there. You've got to capture this kind of level of footage that clearly identifies the person.
Luckily, Mark and his investigations team were also there on another big case, one that happened just 5 miles from here, on a pheasant and partridge shooting estate in 2021.
If you can see here, that's the remains of a pheasant, and that pheasant has had its breast feathers removed so you can see the meat, and it was laid in a place where we thought it was really suspicious. It was on approach to a pheasant release pen, and we immediately thought this is a poison bait. So we very carefully seized that bird, and we then went to Norfolk Police, and that's where the investigation began.
In the UK, most police forces have wildlife crime officers. Here in Norfolk, that job belongs to PC Chris Shelley. He was the officer in charge when Mark brought in the evidence.
The RSPB came to us with information that they believed people was putting poison baits down and targeting birds of prey. We carried out a warrant early one morning at the gamekeeper's address and found a couple of pheasant carcasses, several buzzards, and we found poisons in his vehicle. It is a poison that's been banned for many, many years, and it's a really deadly substance.
On confiscating his phone, the police also found photos of a dead goshawk and 5 dead buzzards, which he later admitted to killing. It was one of the biggest cases of wildlife crime that Chris and Norfolk Police had ever dealt with. The gamekeeper was convicted and received a 12-month community order and a £692 fine.
There are loads of gamekeepers out there in Norfolk, and many of these estates doing fantastic conservation work. Unfortunately, you will always get 1 or 2 that just ruin the reputation for everybody. But we will continue to tackle this.
We asked the British Association for Conservation and Shooting why so many cases of raptor persecution are associated with land managed for game bird shooting, and what they're doing to stamp it out. They told us that BASC takes a zero-tolerance approach to criminal activity towards birds of prey by any sector. Any such deliberate acts are abhorrent, and when connected to game shooting, detract from the proven broader benefits that sustainable shooting brings to nature conservation. Any member found guilty of a wildlife crime will be expelled. The RSPB want tougher legislation around game bird shoots, and they aren't the only ones. A UN assessment of UK wildlife crime in 2021 recommended that the government enhance powers of licensing authorities to revoke licenses for game bird shoots, where abuse occurs with a proven link to estate management. With the number of raptor persecution incidents still so high, Mark also wants to see greater protection for our birds of prey.
We're a really specialist unit, we're really focused. We just need the laws to change, perhaps the sentences to be greater. Personally, I've been doing it for 25 years. It doesn't get easier. Seeing amazing birds like goshawks and red kites and eagles being illegally killed, it's a horrible thing. But it's my calling, it's the team's calling. We have to stop this. We have to have a better future for birds of prey in the UK, and we have to catch the criminals.
A really hard-hitting and sad issue, one which I'm sure we're all very distressed to see. As it stands, the Scottish Government is consulting on whether tighter regulations could be used for grouse shooting in Scotland. And we asked DEFRA whether they would follow suit in England, and this is what they told us. We will monitor the situation in Scotland and consider whether this approach is necessary and proportionate to assist in tackling wildlife crime in England. It's obviously a very sad and hard-hitting subject, but it is a story that we all must know about and we must talk about widely to stop. Now, shall we move on to a bit of a sunnier, more colourful topic? Now, I mentioned earlier that I am within the sand dune system. It's an amazing habitat, and there are lots of specialised species here, including sand lizards that make their home in amongst the dense vegetation where they'll find cover and invertebrates, their prey species, as well as the soft sand, which they use to mate, warm up, and lay their eggs within. Now, they are one of the UK's rarest reptiles, but here in Studland is one of the highest concentrations of sand lizards, and they are absolutely beautiful and a delight to see. We sent out our cameras to see whether we could see any mating. We didn't get mating, but we did send in this amazing footage from one of you at home. 2 sand lizards going about their reproduction ritual. You can see the male, green there, very bright, taking an interest in the female, and he bites her at the base of the tail. Now, she will kind of continue walking, so he must hold on tight, and he will bend his body around to fertilise those eggs. Still, again, holding on tight, bit of a tight grip there. Actually, it's so tight that sometimes you can tell if a female has been mated with because she will bear the scarring of that male bite mark on her back. But they are really brilliant, and we did want to get glimpses of them, potentially even going into their burrows where they lay their eggs. So we sent out Mark Yates, our wildlife cameraman, who followed a female for 2 days. And this is the story that he got. He happened to find a female, and she was very obviously, well, bearing a lot of eggs. They can lay between 6 and 12, and you can see how big her stomach is there. And she's basically prospecting different burrows because she wants to find the perfect one. But when she's looking in, she's obviously quite vulnerable. She has to check up for predators, birds of prey, kestrels, buzzards and things that will take them from above. So she looks out to check the coast is safe and moves on to prospect another burrow. And it is very much a Goldilocks situation. You don't want a burrow that's too dry because ultimately your eggs could shrivel up. You don't want one that's too wet either because otherwise it could be a little bit mouldy, and nobody wants that, especially a sand lizard. And then one too shady as well, then they won't incubate your eggs. You need the sand to be nice and warm under the heat of the sun so that those eggs will develop nicely, and if it's too cold, then they won't. And she emerges here to see a female larger than herself. There's a bit of competition for potential burrows, and well, the larger female with more eggs chases off our female. But no bother, there are lots of perfectly good burrows around. She takes her leave and then returns to checking out a good place for her eggs. It's really unusual to see this. It's brilliant to watch them find the right burrow. There she is. Has she found one that's just right? I think she might have done. She nestles herself in, and this is later on in the evening. She finds this burrow at about 7 o'clock, so the sun is starting to set. It gets a little bit chilly, so she nestles in for the rest of the night to lay those eggs. Now, 16 hours later, she does emerge. Mark Yates stayed until the darkness came and arrived then at 4 a.m. later. There wasn't any activity until 11 a.m., as I said, 16 hours later, where the female then comes out of her burrow. She has laid those eggs, as I said, somewhere between 6 and 12, and she pokes her head up to see if it's warm enough, soaking in those sun rays. And she covers the burrow again, making sure that it is safe from predators before she decides time to go off and do what reptiles do best and have a nice time in the sunshine. Really unusual to see them coming out of their burrows. Lots of data shows them going in, but to actually watch the entire process is quite new and quite exciting. Now, I have some eggs here. Now, these are replica sand lizard eggs, and they'll be about 2 centimetres in length. And they're really, really tiny, and they're quite plain, and the burrows themselves will be about 7 centimetres deep, enough so that they get a lot of the sun rays, but not so deep that they're going to be easily found by predators. What about that? Sand lizard action. Can't get much better than that. Now let's head over back to Arn, where Chris and Michaela are. Chris, I know we filmed sand lizards together a couple of years ago, but I don't remember seeing action quite like that.
No, I've never seen them mating. I have seen them fighting, I have to say, way back in 1974 on Canford Heath. One sunny Sunday morning, my dad took me down there. 21 years before you were even a cell beast, that was. But I'd love to see that mating and burrowing behaviour. It'd be absolutely fantastic. Superb, superb stuff. Now then, what have we got coming up next? I've completely forgotten. Oh, I know. It's our cuckoo.
It's a cuckoo.
So I was carried away with sand lizards there. Let's go live to our cuckoo's nest there, and you can see that young bird. It's in the meadow pipit's nest. We introduced you to it last night. It's facing the wrong way there. You've got a tail view of the young cuckoo in the nest, but there's been plenty of activity throughout the course of the day. The 2 meadow pipit adults have been coming in, doing their very best to satisfy the urges, the hungry urges of this cuckoo. It's got that enormous orange gape there. And look, it's so vociferous that it's begging for more food before it's even swallowed that dragonfly. And the meadow pipits take it back out and give it another go. And then the next one comes in. Backwards and forwards all day long. Now, that cuckoo is going to be in the meadow pipit's nest for 20 days. Typically, meadow pipit chicks would fledge after 12 days, so they've got another whole week of feeding that bird before it's any chance of it leaving the nest.
It's absurd, isn't it? It looks absolutely absurd.
Yeah, it is. Absolutely bonkers, I have to say. Fantastic to see it, though. What have we got coming up? Oh, sorry, we're going to pieces here, aren't we?
You've gone cuckoo, haven't you? We're going to look at what actually happens with the cuckoo when it lays its egg.
What actually happens with the cuckoo when it lays its egg? Right, here's an adult cuckoo, and it's prospecting for hosts. Each one of the cuckoos has a range in which there are a number of its host species. This one has got its eye open for reed warblers. It spots that the reed warbler has moved away from its nest and it dashes in as quickly as possible. If it's spotted by the reed warbler, there's a far greater chance that the reed warbler will reject the egg that it's about to lay in the nest. So in a very short space of time, it picks out one of the reed warbler's eggs, which it may discard or eat. And look, this is it, actually laying the egg into the nest. And there, the reed warbler comes back. It is slightly larger, the cuckoo's egg, but it's sufficiently well camouflaged that it doesn't spot it and it settles down. Now, as I mentioned, the cuckoo's egg actually hatches much more quickly than the reed warbler's egg, and therefore it has the opportunity to use its back to throw all of those reed warbler's eggs out of the nest. And even if there are youngsters there, it will pick them up and struggle up the side of the nest and dump them over the side into the water to ensure that it gets all of the food itself.
The instinct is absolutely incredible, isn't it? The instinct to push those eggs out is phenomenal. Absolutely amazing nature sometimes. OK, but it's not the cuckoo that always has its own way, because sometimes the host species fights back. Take a look at these photographs. This is from Charles Tyler, and Charles was a scientist who studied meadow pipits and cuckoos.
Hello,
meadow pipits and cuckoos. For 20 years in Dartmoor. He observed meadow pipits harassing a cuckoo. I think you've got to agree those are fabulous photos, aren't they? But take a look at this photo as well, because this tells a story too. Because look how alike a cuckoo is to a sparrowhawk. And so sometimes when the cuckoo comes into the nest, then the host species will go because it thinks it's a sparrowhawk coming in, a predator. It lays its eggs so quickly and then manages to escape before they realise.
Let's move very swiftly into our mindfulness moment tonight, where we get our wits back together.
Gorgeous long-tailed tits with that lovely nest. I think you and I should actually snuggle up into a long-tailed tit nest right now and just pull ourselves together. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I think we should. And I tell you what, though, we've just got time to catch up with some live cameras. Let's go live to our kestrels. There they are, looking very happy, as you say, those kestrels. Plenty of food coming in, a great range of different foods that they've been having. Still got some down coat there, but the feathers are poking through. Now, we'll be back again tomorrow, and if I get my medication sorted, I'll be out and about looking for one of the most interesting invertebrates in this part of the world, the one and only raft spider.
And I'll be looking below the waves at a very rare seahorse that makes its home here in Studland.
And I'll be heading along the coast to see some summer visitors that are making the most of a very transient landscape.
And we'll be here in Arn, keeping an eye on all our live cameras, seeing if any more chicks are slapped in the face with a wet fish. You could keep your eyes on the cameras too from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. And Hannah Stipful will be doing her Watch Out with Megan tomorrow, and that's on BBC iPlayer and Instagram. So hopefully we'll all be talking normally.
What do you mean to drink? Another fantastic edition of Springwatch.
What can you do to make a difference to nature and the environment? Well, sometimes big changes come from small actions. The Open University explores simple but effective ways to make a positive impact. To get inspired, go to bbc.co.uk/Springwatch and follow the links to the Open University.